found out about the events that were transpiring with Jackson Public Schools, we always like to bring pertinent information to the people from the hands of everyone who is intimately involved in this process, so that we can inform and educate the people appropriately. First off, Dr. Omari, thank you for all your hard work and your slaps on the wrist. When I go to the left, to the right, too far, you definitely had a degree of gravity to city government when you were here before, and you have brought a deeper degree of gravity in the moment in time that we're in now, as you are at the right hand of the mayor and assist in putting things together and getting the administration's anchors in the ground and getting prepared to move forward. Thank you for all the hard work and dedication. And through this process of Jackson Public Schools, I don't see this as the ending. This is the beginning of continuing to move forward. This is not, all the problems don't get solved because of an action today by any parties. But I do believe we're in a moment in time now where we got to put our phone down. We got to, as parents, we got to, stop snapping, chatting, posting, tweeting so much, but actually spend some time with our children and make sure that individually and collectively, as a city, we're doing what's necessary to properly educate our children. So we reached out to the mayor's office, and I appreciate you for coming on the show. It's just short notice, just so that we can hear and learn directly from the administration about what's taking place. So feel free to take your time. We won't take any calls for about 30 minutes, just to allow you time to articulate, where we are, where we were, and how we got to where we are and where we're going.
And let me also welcome you as Chief of Staff. I have known this young lady for quite a number of years. We worked very intimately at Jackson State, as well as with the late Mayor Shockway Lumumba. So I was very pleased when I heard that she was going to be coming on to provide us with some information. There was very little in the 4 o'clock news, but I know that you have the intimate knowledge of much more detailed information. So please just inform us of exactly what's included in the package, and then we'll chime in with questions or whatever as time passes.
Okay. Thank both of you for inviting me here. Councilman Stamps, I want to thank you for your thoughtfulness and your attention to detail on the council. That kind of scrutiny can only help the citizens of Jackson and help the mayor's office deliver the kind of services that our citizens deserve. And for Dr. Phillips, of course, we've been in the trenches together. We've worked together for a long time, so I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. The events of today, what we did was we announced a Memorandum of Understanding that has been signed by the governor's office, the mayor's office, Kellogg Foundation, and Jackson Public Schools. This Memorandum of Understanding establishes a 15-member board. Not sure of what the exact name of it is. It's Education
Advisory Commission.
Excellence Advisory Commission. Yes, and the word advisory is key, because they have no authority to do anything other than choose the company that will conduct, or the organization, I should say, that will conduct an independent audit of JPS and give us a real-time picture of our strengths, our weaknesses, and make recommendations as to where we go from here. That's the purpose of the Educational Excellence Advisory Commission. there will be members appointed to that commission by the governor's office, by the mayor's office, and we will make some consultation with Kellogg because of their national connections in this area. It took a while to get here, and I think our citizens understand that when it was announced that MDE intended to take over Jackson Public Schools, the mayor was very forthright and adamant that control of JPS should remain in local hands. And he made some very strong statements, including the statement that the city would be willing to take control of JPS if there was a mechanism through which we could do so. His advocacy and the advocacy of other groups such as our JPS, the Black Caucus in the state legislature, and other JPS itself and other groups prevented the governor from just doing a knee-jerk signing of the emergency order. And I'd like to take this opportunity to also thank Governor Bryant for taking the time to be thoughtful and deliberative about this process, especially with so much at stake. And I would say you never have more at stake than you have when you're talking about the education of our children. So we appreciate the governor and his staff for taking the time to arrange a series of meetings with key stakeholders to discuss JPS and try to figure out the best way forward. So when the mayor met with the governor, and I attended that meeting along with Dr. Blaine, and the governor was clear that he wanted to do what was in the best interest of Jackson Public Schools. He also stated that he wanted a third option. And we decided when we left that meeting that we would sit down and write a plan for a third option. And this Educational Excellence Advisory Commission was a part of that third option that we later presented to the governor's office for consideration. Since the takeover, the pending takeover threat, we have received an outpouring of support from a number of philanthropic entities within the city, as well as from national philanthropic foundations as well. The Kellogg Foundation, it has a local office, and it has been very much invested in what happens in Jackson. And apparently they had been having conversations all along with Jackson Public Schools and other organizations. They had funded things at Jackson Public Schools and all of that. But I don't want to focus too much on them, because we just appreciate their stepping forward and offering to help fund this advisory commission, as well as the study that will be done by the company. But the greatest thing, and we talked to them when we were developing our third option, they were adamant that there should be community involvement. And of course, this administration really believes in community involvement. As a matter of fact, we had rolled drafts of our third option out to various constituencies to look at before we took it into the governor. And Kellogg will also facilitate the community meetings that will be had. When I say facilitate, they'll provide funding and help support those meetings that will take place in the community around the future of JPS. So this is truly a collaboration. Now, we talk about, this is not the solution. This is the beginning of the process to identify the solutions that will best work for Jackson Public Schools. So in this process, we will get the community input. You know, what's good about JPS? What's wrong about JPS from their perspective? What things would you like to see happen in Jackson Public Schools? How can we best serve our communities through our schools? The business community. How can we best serve the business community through our school system? And the advisory commission is going to be filled with people who are experts in K through 12. And they will tell us what best practices are, what has worked around the country in transforming urban school districts. We talked about, what do you call it, justice, restorative justice within school systems. So what models work? Will that fit here? You know, considering who we are, because what we understand is what has to come out of this is a process that's uniquely designed to make Jackson Public Schools the best that it can be. We know we have good students. We know we have some excellent teachers. We also know we have some excellent administrators, right? So, but there's some things that are wrong, and there's some things that have to be fixed. So how do we best fix those things and create this transformation within our educational system that will put us on the map, that will move us from 50th to at least the top 10, right? Well, yeah. I think we'll settle for the top 25. But, you know, that's what this whole process is about. So I think that's the background, and that's how we got to where we are today. And there's some other things. We will be keeping Dr. Murray as the interim superintendent. He did not have a chance to complete the corrective action plan that MDE placed JPS under, so we think it's only fair. He's made some rather substantive changes, and we feel that it's best that he be given the opportunity to fix that. There will be a new board. That board will be appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. And we hope to begin that process early next week. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're on, as well as, you know, the council, even though we consulted with you all before signing the MOU, we know that our city council has to actually ratify it. And so we will do all those things next week to make sure that, you know, we have everything in order to move forward with the transformation process.
Okay, good. I do have a couple of, they're almost nuts and bolts questions.
Okay.
One, you mentioned the superintendent will be there.
Mm-hmm.
What about teacher security?
At this point in time, the only thing that has been talked about is teacher development opportunities.
Okay.
There's been no discussion of removing teachers and that kind of thing. Those things that are already in place within JPS would remain in place until some recommendations are made and adopted by a new school board.
Okay. And you mentioned restorative justice.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other significant features about this plan that we ought to take note of?
The restorative justice plan or the other...
The overall plan that we're talking about.
The overall plan. Let me say the plan that we presented to the governor included this advisory commission, but we talked about restorative justice within the whole discipline context. We talked about a 21st century learning environment, which includes engagement with technology, all those things that help create the reading by the third grade, all of those things that create good students and provide a better education. So we talked about the learning environment. We talked about an emphasis on teacher development, and we also talked about restructuring the budget so that more of the dollars within JPS are actually spent in the classroom. However, at this point, the only thing that is being dealt with is the Educational Advisory Commission.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just for the sake of the audience, again, you said their role will be primarily to do what?
Their role will be to choose the independent organization that does the audit and evaluation of JPS, and then as they're experts in the K through 12 area, they will make recommendations for improvement within the system. They will essentially make those recommendations to the City of Jackson at this point.
Okay. You want me to continue?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I also wondered if you could just explain to the audience from your perspective the superiority of this process compared to the state takeover.
Okay. Well, we know historically state takeovers have not been successful. And even when some districts have come out of receivership, they end up having to go right back in because they never got to the root of what the real issues are, what the real problems were. We know that there are some issues within JPS, and we know that we can stand to do a lot of improvement within the school system. This provides us with the opportunity to take our time and be strategic in terms of what problems we address and the order in which they are addressed. JPS didn't become broken overnight. Or it didn't. I know when I first moved to Jackson and my daughter was in high school, she got excellent education at Callaway High School, and went on to study at Kent State and NYU, where people were just amazed at how well, and Tougaloo, and people were amazed at how well prepared she was. So we know that the school district has worked in the past. So what is it?
And is working.
And is working in some ways
several
now.
areas.
Yeah.
You know, we got a whole list of young folks who score over a 30. You know, you got 99% of the GROTC program graduating high school. You know, so the entire district is not broken. There are several highlights that don't make the 6 o'clock news.
Exactly.
That are there. One thing in this process we have to do is remember that to me, the only thing wrong with the children is the adults. The adults at all phases of the spectrum from the parent to the teacher to the principal to the superintendent to the city council to the mayor to everybody, every adult who affects the process needs to do a better job of affecting the process.
Right.
Because the children are only given the community and structure that we give them. And so everyone who provides something to the village of that child's life needs to understand that, you know, maybe it's time for me to put my phone down. Maybe it's time for me to make sure that if the parent, see, one thing that I focus on, you know, is homework should be 100%. Because child does homework, parent check homework, and homework should be correct when it goes back to the school. We should make sure that our children, we should check homework, all that stuff. We should make sure that our children are in bed on time. We should make sure that our things are done properly. My only question right now is,
can I just comment on that? And I do want to emphasize that there are some things within JPS that are working extremely well. Mm-hmm. The issue becomes why do they work well, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And then how do we spread that out mm-hmm. across the district mm-hmm. so that you don't have to be in an IB program or an APAC program or any of the special programs mm-hmm. to succeed. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what I would like to say about the district. There's some things that, as I said earlier, we got some excellent administrators, some excellent teachers, and we got fantastic students, right? Mm-hmm. But we also have to look at the demographics, because, you know, I tend to, when I think about when I was in school, mm-hmm. Kids, nothing is really the same, really. I mean, you know, the old folk have the expression, you got to stay black and die, right? Those are two things that are absolute. And the bottom line is they're right, because everything else constantly changes. And what we've seen is a constant change. I can think back 15 years ago, everybody didn't have a cell phone, right? Mm-hmm. Now everybody has a cell phone. Most people have smartphones where they have access to the internet and all kinds of information instantaneously. So technology is the world that we live in. So when we talk about, and a lot of successful school districts, I won't say most because I don't have that data, but a lot of successful school districts have incorporated that technology into the classroom. So instead of a student getting suspended for having a cell phone, they use the cell phone in the classroom as a part of the education process. So those are some things that we have to look at within our district to see ways in which we can change. And we also understand, though, that we have to train our teachers to be able to have the skill set to incorporate that technology into the classroom. So those things are very important. And I just have one more thing I want to say. I do agree with you that it is the responsibility of us adults. There's nothing wrong with our children other than the families that they may have been born into and the communities that the largest societies have allowed to deteriorate to the point where they're not nourishing environments for children to grow up in. With that in mind, I have a very good friend who is 80-something years old, and she's a retired school teacher. She graduated from Grambling University when she was 20 with her teacher's degree. She went to teach in a small town in Louisiana. And she said, you know, we were in the woods, so in the morning I had to get up and go and light the wood stove so that the schoolroom would be hot, and I would have to cook breakfast. This was all part of her job as a teacher. She and the other teachers also prepared lunch. And if there was a child who came from a home where they were not being properly groomed, and they came to school dirty and the kids were teasing them, they always had clothes in a closet, clean clothes, where they could take them and wash them up and let them change clothes so they didn't have to worry about being teased by all the kids in the classroom. So she said, we were prepared as teachers to be mama, daddy, teacher, social worker, psychologist, and all of that.
And a lot of that's still going on today.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of teachers who think their job is simply to teach and go home. There are a lot of schools that we haven't provided with the resources that they need so we can provide those kind of wraparound services for our kids who are in need. There are a lot of kids coming from disorganized families, disorganized communities, who really can't be expected to learn in the traditional way without a whole lot of help. And so those are some things that we also need to look at, considering the demographics of our city.
I want to go back and re-emphasize the point I think that you and
Before that, you just let the callers know. We're going to take callers in about 5 more minutes, just so we can just flush everybody's conversation out.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, as quiet as it's kept, Murrah High School is nationally ranked. Davis Magnet IB School is nationally ranked. And the point that you were making that I wanted to re-emphasize, so what do? We find out why are these national ranked, what it is that they're doing, what kind of resources they are provided with, and then duplicate that for everybody else. I think, again, the other point that I want to make is that the evaluation or assessment that was done by State Department of Ed
Indeed.
focused on a few bad things, and then that became symptomatic of the entire system, as opposed to looking at the good stuff and then giving JPS the opportunity to go back and duplicate that and spread it out across the district. And I must also add, and I'm not speaking of, of the present school board members, but there have been times when there were school board members who deliberately favored certain schools and thereby shortchanged other schools. We have to get beyond that, and that brings me to the final point that I think that you're making, and that is, in looking at this program, I was so happy to hear you say that they are looking at a way to make sure that 60% of the funds go into the classrooms, because over a period of time, fewer and fewer dollars were going into the classroom as compared to administrative stuff, consultants, contracts, and those kind of things. We know, or we can easily figure out what it is we need to do in order to deal with all of the schools, as opposed to allowing a few schools to sink the entire district.
I only have just a few questions. The role of the advisory commission that's being adopted, what body will be doing the governing of the school district, voting for the normal business of the school board?
The school board.
So
The new school board will have the
sure.
same responsibilities as the old one.
Okay, I just want to make sure I
So
heard
they'll
it
be
right.
the governing body.
Okay, so this it will be more than an advisory board. It'll be the actual this will become
Okay,
the
there'll be
governing.
2 boards.
Okay.
Okay, there'll be an advisory board that's 15 people.
Okay.
Then you will have your JPS school board made up of the 7 people from the wards.
Okay, so there will just be I just want to make sure I understood that, because I still got to wait to get a draft of everything so I can make sure we can all sing the same song.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so just for those who understand, there will be a new appointed school board and an advisory board. The advisory board will just work on the study and the assessment and the gap analysis and those types of things.
Yes.
And there will be a school board appointed in the normal process that we already have. Okay. And then also, one other point to make is the state takeover is just on the shelf it's not gone away. That whole emergency declaration is still on the shelf and could be pulled out. So we're gonna make sure that piece. Let's catch this call. What is this call? Hello, caller. Welcome to the show. What's your question or comment?
Yes, I heard everything that Dr. Omari said, but every time I hear someone say that Jackson Public Schools, that for a validation or reason that they give for the failure, academic failure of Jackson Public Schools, is because Jackson Public School is an urban school district. So that tells me, because I hear it all the time, that tells me that it is accepted that we cannot educate kids within Jackson Public Schools. That's the first thing. It's just accepted. And it is exemplified through the test scores, the academic test. I'm not talking about broken windows. I'm not talking about half-full fire extinguishers. I'm talking about academic achievement. And then every time I hear people talk about, when we talk about this, people go to the fringes. That's what you said. You said something similar last week, Councilman Stamps. They talk about these small successes, but the great masses of the students are failing. And we're not addressing them. And so I just don't see, again, there's nothing in this process. Jackson Public Schools will be an F academically next year. And there is nothing in this process that's going to change that. We have given up and said that we got to go to the Kellogg Foundation, and nationally, there is not the expertise within Jackson or the existing Jackson Public School system to turn it around. And so if we accept that, then why not just do a takeover? And that's it. And Dr. Omari, when you keep saying our children, do you live in Jackson? Do you live in Jackson?
No, I don't live in Jackson right now, but I have lived in Jackson, and all three of my kids went through Jackson Public Schools. So I have a vested interest in the success of Jackson. So how Jackson goes, the rest of the metro area goes, sir.
Could I make a little short
But
comment?
Dr. Omari, when you take taxes, those taxes go to Jackson Public Schools. That helps the school district.
All right, so we're not going to go off the rails here, but thank you for your call, your question, and your attention. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the state takeover because we've seen it over and over again. The State Department of Education does not have the resources, human, fiscal, or otherwise, to really do a job of improving any of the school districts. We can look at the history and realize that of all the districts that have been taken over, virtually everyone has gone back to where it had been because the State Department of Education merely comes in, offers advice or suggestions, and moves out. And in the meantime, you've changed the entire governing structure. You've taken away completely local control, and then you leave people back in the same predicament that they were in. So the state takeover is really a thing that we ought to just get rid of entirely. We need to find ways to bring in additional ideas, additional resources, and those kind of things in order to make the improvements.
Now, one thing that's been brought to my attention that we're always talking about all issues of Jackson, and we have to safeguard ourselves from is that state takeover opportunity still looms. Whether this governor wants to do it or he wants to put it to the side and allow the next governor in 2 years to pull it off the shelf and execute it. I look at all of this as a call to action of everyone at every level to do what you need to do to affect the process of educating children in the city of Jackson, whether it be economically, whether it be personal responsibility. It's a call to action of engagement, first of parents and teachers. If this doesn't make you focus on your responsibility individually and collectively of what needs to happen, if this doesn't wake you up, you deserve to get taken over by the state. If this moment right now does not wake you up, you sit back and don't become active and don't start paying attention to your child's education and don't start doing the things that are necessary, then because when you don't clean your own house, other people will come clean the house up, because this is government. That's how government works at all levels. If you don't have the intestinal fortitude to make hard decisions, to piss folks off because they're comfortable in their mess, and steer them towards productive activity, and we all need to. We need to do this in our churches, in our school district, and in the city of Jackson as a whole. We all need to identify what the role is of every position and ensure that every position and person is efficient and effective in that role. And so this is a process that we all need to do in all facets of just living in the city, from a regular constituent, of cleaning your own property and cleaning your own house up, to all the way to the top. So this is just a top to bottom wake up call and call to action to do what you're supposed to do as a government.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say as well is that no one has given up on Jackson Public Schools. If we had, we would not be having this discussion.
Okay.
And the events that took place today would not have taken place. So, yes, our children in Jackson Public Schools can learn. And we want to provide them with a system that allows them to maximize their potential, right? Sometimes we want everything to happen all at once, but we don't want to do anything.
That's right.
So this is the first step in our doing something to transform our schools, rather than just sitting around and complaining about what's not happening there. We want to provide an opportunity for all children, and we want to make it happen. So the idea that we'd be better off because we don't believe in JPS is ludicrous.
Mm-hmm.
Phyllis, I know you're the dean of the show. We got a few minutes left to go, so give us some words of wisdom and guide us out of here. Tell us about some next steps and where, in that wise mind of y'all, where we're going next.
Yeah, it's funny that you put it in that kind of context, because as I sit here between the two of you, I hear the wisdom that the community possesses. We are on the right track. It's a matter now of making sure that we dot every I and cross every T. The State Department of Ed came in, did its assessment. We now need to make sure that that assessment was not full of holes and not bogus. And from what I hear from you, Dr. Omari, is that we're going to bring in an independent auditor who can go back and look at all those things. Then they will provide advice to the entire district. And then we can simply go step by step, correcting those things, making those improvements without the pressure of feeling that, well, tomorrow we may be taken over. And then for you, Brother Stamp, as you indicated, one of the problems is that somewhere around 1970, we began to lose contact with our schools. The schools belong to the parents, the teachers, and the communities. And we need to feel welcome enough, we need to feel compelled enough to continuously involve ourselves in the school and what it is doing, what it needs to do. Those are the simple things that have always worked. And it just reminded me what you said about the teacher in Louisiana. That's what our teachers back then did because they felt connected with it. But again, as I said, somewhere in the early 70s, we began to lose that kind of involvement, that kind of connectivity, and we simply need to go back to it. And let me thank you before we go off the air, because the time is really running away. Let me thank you for coming on and sharing with us. And hopefully, sometime in the future, we'll be getting back to you and others who have this first-hand knowledge. And before we go off the air, I did want to make one announcement. It has been brought to my attention that on November the 1st, they are going to rename 220. It'll be the Henry Kirksey Alice Hardin Freeway.
Oh.
They'll be sharing that honor. Kirksey Middle School at 10 o'clock will have a program that deals with his part of the program and why he's being so honored. And then at 2 o'clock, right now it's going to be in the Metro Center, they will deal with Alice Hardin. This is an honor that's been a long time coming, well deserved by both individuals. That's going to be November the 1st, 10 o'clock at Kirksey Middle School and 2 o'clock in the Metro Center, where they'll rename 220 in honor of those individuals.
And as always, everyone, we want to end our show by thanking Ms. Dorothy Stewart and Ms. Willie Jones and all the members of Women for Progress for allowing the Man Cave to take place once a month on the fourth Thursday of the month. We appreciate all of our supporters. We appreciate Dr. Quinn and all the other donors and sponsors of Women for Progress Radio and Women for Progress, period, because this has been a community organization that is definitely impacting lives. So thank you for everyone who participates. Thank you to our co-host, Dr. Ivory Phillips and Dr. Safiya Omari and Ms. Queen Franklin for coming by today. And as I say at the end of all of our shows, never let anybody put you in a position where you don't love your own people. Because when you hate your own people, you're part of the very oppression we're trying to lift ourselves out of. I love you, Jackson. Love you, Mississippi. Handy man, take us out of here.